I'm sure this is going to be very shocking for many of you to hear, but I don't think that Dragon Age the Veilguard is going to be a success. I think it's going to be a massive failure. I think it's going to sell poorly. I think the gaming community as a whole are pretty much going to reject it. They're going to see it as a bad game. EA as well, they might not admit to it being a failure, but they'll show that in their actions. They might close BioWare, they might heavily downsize. When the book is closed on all of this, I think we're going to see the game as a big flop, a big dud. That is basically it. And I'm speaking the obvious for a reason, and it is because it is obvious. We can all use our eyes, we can see it. The game overall just has a real pathetic vibe to it. It's lost all of the tone of what made the series popular originally with Origins, which had a bit of a gritty sword and sorcery feel to it. I mean, the companions in this game, none of them are appealing. It has this DEI sort of simulator feel to it, and all the companions tick those boxes. I think they came out and said today, oh, one of them's non-binary, the game is saved, something to that effect. The combat, maybe it's serviceable, but it's not selling the game. Like, there's nothing within the RPG sort of core mechanics or what would normally interest RPG fans. None of those aspects are strengths. It might do some things okay, but it doesn't do anything really good. It's basically a step down in every department compared to any of the games in the genre that we actually consider good. But I want to really hone in on that key one, which is the presentation of the game, the vibe, which I think it's failed in the most, because most of those sort of nerdy RPG aspects, like choice and consequence, all of that sort of crap, most of those things don't really sell the game when you're marketing it. Most people, like just average players of games, they're not going online, looking all this stuff up. They just go off the vibe, and the vibe is genuinely awful. Like, I spoke about DEI Simulator, and that's literally what this game is. It's a political activist's wet dream of a game. It was conceived from the ground up that way. Every box needed to be ticked. The director of the game, trans director of the game, said, I look at games differently. I've got my unique perspective, and we want the game to be a safe space for our community. They call it our community, but I'd be betting money that a lot of people in the LGBT community don't care about this. The majority of people who care and talk about that stuff are so-called allies of that community, where they just love the idea of being involved because they want to be a victim and sort of grab onto that. That's all they really care about. They don't care about gay people or whatever. But just really that aspect, like the presentation, it doesn't have the cool factor. Again, no sort of dark source and sorcery vibe. It doesn't look like something you'd want to play, spend money on, get entertainment out. Everyone can see it. I mean, defenders of this game, they're going to try and say, no, it's only the anti-woke crowd who don't like this. Everyone else is loving it. When the reality is, even the most casual video game is going to look at this and go, it looks crap. Looks sad, I'm not gonna waste my money on it. But the reason for this prediction, which again I don't think is brave, I think this is gonna be how it plays out. It's not gonna work out for BioWare, it's gonna be a dud. Maybe they'll surprise us somehow in Bizarro World. It's a big success. Baldur's Gate 3 goes into hiding because this game's so good. Maybe that'll happen, and I'll give it a 0.2 chance of happening so that I don't look biased. But here's the thing. If it plays out this way like I think it will, and again, I don't think that's brave. I think most people are predicting this is going to bomb for most of those reasons that I mentioned. The defenders, which is the devs, games media, the wider games development industry, people online, on Twitter, X, who probably won't even buy the game, but they'll make it their mission to defend it because they think that their political values are at risk because this game by a trans director has failed. These people are going to adamantly defend it, but they're going to be defending Veilguard in such a way that it may actually damage the wider RPG industry going forward. And that's really my concern. It's one of the reasons I like to rip on games like the Veilguard. I do it to Bloodlines 2 as well, because I think these games actually have potential to damage the industry. The reason I think that is because these defenders, they're not actually defending the games in a lot of cases, especially with the Veilguard. They're actually just defending their political views, but they're doing it under the disguise of defending this game. From their point of view, this game failing puts their political values at risk because they've put Veilguard, for instance, out to market And they're saying there's an audience for this. Everyone wants to play it. There's a big majority who are waiting for something like the Veilguard. Look at all these characters. Aren't they cool? Isn't this what the modern audience wants? And then when it fails, they can't actually admit that the reason it failed is because the vibe, the game, everything you see and look at, what it is, they can't admit that it failed for those reasons, so they have to come up with other ones. And those other reasons are things like, oh, there's too many RPGs on the market, or no one actually wants RPGs anymore. The audience just isn't there in the AAA space. Forget about Baldur's Gate 3. That was by like a 1 in a million studio who had early access and all this funding and everything. In the real world, RPGs just aren't gonna happen. You make a great game like the Veilguard, the community doesn't want it. You can't win with RPG fans. It's a lot of these sort of defenses, instead of just looking at the obvious. Like I mentioned earlier, you look at the game, it looks crap. These defenders will never acknowledge that possibility. And I'm not just dooming and pulling that opinion out of my ass for the sake of it. This is actually happening right now with Concord. And I've noticed this pattern with a number of games recently, these real over-the-top DEI games that completely fail, and then there's people sort of scrambling to explain why. It's definitely not because of the woke DEI elements, it's definitely not, it's all these other things. And when you blame those other things, it actually damages gaming. So these people are awful, they hate gaming, they really do not care, they're just defending their politics. To give you the Concord example, we'll start with this person, Shinobi602. This is a BioWare shill. He's someone who's friends with the devs, and in the years leading up to Mass Effect Andromeda's release, this person was hyping it up, and they're like, oh, BioWare's cooking, Mass Effect's gonna be making this huge comeback. You're gonna forget about the original trilogy, because this new entry, Mass Effect 4, it's gonna blow your mind. It releases, there's a little bit of that, oh, my face is tired, or whatever it was, everyone's clowning, laughing at the game. It fails. You'd think this person would lose all credibility, but then they were doing the same with Anthem. Oh, BioWare's finally going to make their dream game, Anthem. Here it comes, and we don't even need to talk about that. Not meaning just to single this person out, because there's plenty of people like this, which I'll show you, but A, it's a BioWare fanboy, and B, it's someone who loses their mind if you just point out that maybe, just maybe, DEI elements in games have a negative effect. This is his latest retweet, which is just melting down about some woke content detector list or something like that. But this person makes a post about why Concord failed, and there's so many of these lately. And he says, there are multiple reasons I think something like Concord didn't quite land, specifically with the PlayStation audience, price, marketing. But one of the major ones is how saturated the hero or arena shooter market feels, rightly or wrongly to players. Every one of these takes on Concord failing, it follows the exact same lines, which is basically Emperor's New Clothes. You're not allowed to acknowledge at all that this game, possibly the biggest video game failure of all time, not just in the last year or two, maybe ever dating back to the 80s and maybe beyond, it's that bad. It's the biggest failure, which means you've really got to look at this from every angle. These people failed to even acknowledge that it might have been because of the presentation, because people didn't want to play as obese characters, men who look like women, vice versa. Maybe, just maybe, playing as these abominations was not appealing, and that's why it failed. These people will not even just raise the question. They pretend like it's not even something to bring up. Like, you're just immature, you're a culture warrior or something. If you bring up that the appearance of the characters might actually matter. And they're only talking about this, they're only even making posts about Concord failing because they're desperate to defend their politics. Because deep down, they kind of know that maybe this was a problem, that the presentation was an issue, and they also know that the reason the characters looked the way they did, why they looked so awful, was for political reasons, because these deranged morons who make Concord, who make games like this, their political beliefs right now seem to be, you've got to make characters ugly. If you make characters attractive, it's some sort of oppression, the male gaze. We hate these people we're making games for, so we're going to make everything look absolutely awful, and somehow our politics come out on top. Like, it's insane. But someone like this feels the need to defend their side of politics, so they blame all of these other things. Do you really think that we've just had the biggest failure ever because the game cost $40? Because of the marketing? And the marketing is a dog shit reason to blame, because it seems to me like Sony lowered the marketing budget after they did like the beta test and they got terrible player numbers. So they realized they saw the writing on the wall and pulled some of that back. So the game was a fail like the second that they showed it. Maybe you say that's part of the marketing, but that was really just showing the characters, showing the game and what it looked like. It wasn't like a whole marketing campaign. Like, the game was a flop the second they showed it on screen and people saw the supposed heroes who we're going to play as, and it all looked just sad. It looked like, again, just activists ramming their ideology down our throats and expecting to get paid for it. If you want a politically activist, go and do that elsewhere. Stop ruining the industry. They tried to do that, it failed, and now you get people like this pretending that it failed for other reasons. Now, I'm willing to take a couple of steps in their direction and acknowledge that, yes, maybe the oversaturation of hero shooters, arena shooters, maybe the price point, those things played a part in the game failing. I'm willing to acknowledge that it's not only the DEI elements that made it fail. Maybe if it was an incredible, innovative game, it would have still found an audience despite it looking and feeling like crap. But these people, they won't even acknowledge for one single second that maybe there was something wrong with the presentation and it had an impact. And the reason for that is they can't. Like, their political beliefs, they'd be undermining them, their whole belief system, if they just acknowledge that there was a problem here. And there's so many people doing this. Like, you look all over Reddit, all of the usual suspect sites. So many. The industry as a whole, Concord failed because woke characters, the person says sarcastically. Is it possible that Concord failed instead because it adds nothing meaningful to an already crowded genre? Charge $40 when most of its competitors are free, and not because of woke DEI. Well, again, it could have partly failed because of those first reasons that you mentioned. Happy to acknowledge it, but it also absolutely failed because of the DEI stuff. And I feel like these people could earn maybe an ounce of credibility if they just came out and said, hey, maybe we went too far this time with the so-called representation. Maybe we shouldn't have just shoved all the DEI buzzwords into a ChatGPT blender, obese, retarded, blue hair, pink hair, put them in a blender, and then that's the game, essentially. Like, every character looks ridiculous. Like, it's like a parody of itself, a parody of DEI if you were trying to do that. That was literally our game. If they said maybe we went too far, but we don't think that was the only reason it failed. It's also these other things, like the price, like the oversaturated market. You can't say everything about the game failing was the DEI. There were some other elements. If they said that, then absolutely, I'd say, yes, there were definitely other problems. But the fact that they go full Emperor's New Clothes, it can't be the DEI. And this person, this is where it does fall into parody territory, where it's so embarrassing for them. Because someone says here, Concord failed because it was a rip-off of Overwatch that you had to pay for. Not because a fat woman is in it. And I find that kind of funny by itself, because like Overwatch for years, people have complained about how it's never really changed. Like Overwatch 2 was a borderline scam. It feels like people actually were waiting for a new Overwatch, which felt fresher and so on. But anyway, the main thing that's actually comical is the top comment. While I 100% agree with your general point on why the game failed, I'm pretty sure I remember from the beta that that character is a dude. So the person who's defending the game and these stupid characters doesn't even know the gender of those characters. Even this person is confused. And he can't even have the self-awareness to go, maybe that's why the game failed, because I can't even tell he or she. So the general audience are just going to look at it and go, what the fuck? I'm not going near it. I'm not wasting my money. They won't acknowledge for even a second that the DEI stuff played a part in its failure. This has been a theme basically all year with all the Sweet Baby stuff, Dustborn, everything else. They'll never acknowledge, and you can go to TV shows like The Acolyte, Rings of Power. It's the new defense is to blame all of these other aspects. And the problem is when you blame like hero shooters, or in the case of Dragon Age, you blame the RPG genre for why the game is failing. That is actually going to damage the industry if people listen to these fools. Because if the industry goes, oh, the reason the Veilguard flopped is, oh, DEI, what's DEI? We don't know what that is. That's just anti-woke people talking about that. No, if the game failed, it must just be because no one's interested in role-playing games. That must be it. Back to the live services that are so safe to produce. There's never been any flops in that field. But it is kind of a worry, and it is what people should get prepared for. When the game flops, if it flops, but we know when is the right word, really, they're gonna move those goalposts, change the narrative, and pretend that all of the ridiculousness is nothing to do why the game failed. They're going to have all of these different reasons, get into all these little technical aspects, the marketing, this, that. When we really know we can open our eyes, we will know why this game failed and why people had no interest. And obviously this crap extends to the development studios, the BioWares, the Concord studio as well, which basically resemble cults at this point, political cults. And I really just hope, like, when you look at the ridiculousness of Concord, that Sony acknowledged, like, this is the reason that we lost hundreds of millions of dollars. It wasn't because we had a little bit of lackluster marketing or we did this little thing wrong. No, fundamentally, you open your eyes, you look at this game, you know very quickly why it was the biggest flop of all time. No one wants this, like, hundreds and hundreds of years of media, even advertising. We've seen that people just want normal, attractive-looking characters. That's what sells. And by allowing these people, these studios, to use your money, your funding, to push propaganda onto people, to be activists, that's why this happens. That's why you have this fail. And the same thing is going to happen to the Veilguard, it looks like. It's the same story where I hope EA, if this does bomb, that they take that lesson and realize it's not RPGs that are the problem, it's BioWare, it's the studio, and you do not listen to the defenders of this, who are defending the political values of BioWare by pretending that all these market factors are going to be the reason why the game fails, that'll be the defense. It's none of that. You can't allow this anymore. Things are changing. People are less accepting of games that look like garbage because there's so many other options, entertainment options. Don't allow this to happen. Don't allow the Veilguard to damage the RPG genre by ignoring the real reasons why it failed. We all know if you make a great RPG with all the things that gamers are actually interested in, why they gravitate to that escapism, playing something, going into a different world, all that creativity. If you do that, the game will be a big success. We've seen it many, many times. It's only games like Concord, like the Veilguard, that rightly deserve to be bombed. So if the Veilguard does end up being a bomb, I don't think that people should stay quiet. They should be very vocal about why they didn't like it and why they thought it was crap, why they didn't buy it. All of those things. I think that's very important. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.